Thanks for tuning into the Three Circles Living podcast, where you can learn how to improve your life, no matter if you want to accelerate your professional career, if you want to have better and healthier relationships, a healthier life, or find fulfillment and purpose in life. This is a podcast for you. And again, make sure to share it and leave a comment with the nugget or insight that you found most valuable. We would appreciate it. All right, what are we talking about today? We're continuing about talking about the interpersonal communication and the gaps that can come up. And we're going to dive into the lens and perspective and how it actually shapes the communication in our relationships in all of our life. It's not just personal relationships, it's also professional relationships. And I think we talked about it last time as well, but how often have you found yourself saying something with good intentions, but then somebody is taking it the wrong way, and you're asking yourself, what the heck happened? And a big part is that lens and the effect it has on everyone in that is in that communication. And every person, goes through life with a unique set of views and experiences and beliefs and emotions. And we really want to explore with you today of how these different lenses create communication gaps and how also we can bridge them. So let's dive in.
That sounds good, Chris. I can't wait to hear what you have to say on this topic.
I can't wait to hear what you can't wait to hear what you have to say. Geez, it's been a
Uh,
morning.
I understand. Actually, I had a pretty amazing week, but that's beside the point. Nobody cares about that. So, one thing I wanted to clarify a little bit, the lens, the idea of the lens. If you think about every interaction that you have, and you ask the question, how often do you have conversations essentially that go sideways? I mean, really, that's kind of how you said it much nicer than that, but that's what happens. They go sideways. You could actually flip that and go, how often do you have them where they don't? Because more conversations go sideways in some manner, and there's so much challenge to try to get to what's really going on. A lot of that is skill based, but much of it is what we're going to talk about now. Although skills eliminate this, but we're not, it's going to take us a while to get to the skill side. But when you talk about the lens, if you think about every interaction, you have three things that are happening. You have the intention, right? The intention of each person. You have the perception of each person. And then you have the behavior plus words of each person, right? That's what's in play. There's three entirely different things that are going on. And it's very rare that they're congruent, right? It's very rare that those things all match up. And again, without skills, you're just like, you're like in a quagmire trying to figure out what's trying to get your point across. You're trying to accomplish the mission of the discussion, so to speak. But today, we're talking specifically about the lens, but I want to clarify the lens too. So it's pretty easy to understand what I would call the static part of the lens, and we touched on it last time, and you sort of addressed it now. That is not highly changeable. It is changeable, but it's not. You're not changing your static lens, so to speak, in 5 minutes because that is from your conditioning. That's been how you were brought up, and that is very deeply rooted stuff. And then you have the variable lens, which is the dynamic that really affects things dramatically, right? That is what might have happened 1 minute ago to
Mhm.
someone before, right? They might have just gotten a terrible message on social media, or someone just came in and threw up all over them, or they got chastised for something that they didn't do, or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. They had a fight with their loved one, or and you start a conversation, or you go to connect about something, and poof, you're in the midst of their emotional outburst. That is their variable lens was just whacked in this moment. But in general, The variable lens has to do with things like what is the current quality of life of that person? And quality of life is an entire subject because there are many, many factors that create your perceived quality of life, how you're experiencing your life in this moment, your health and your relationships. The state of those two things are two of the significant ones, but they are not the only ones. They're two of the ones for our purposes that are
Mhm.
very obvious. Someone who doesn't feel physically good, I mean, their lens is not going to be good in this moment,
Yeah.
right? Fatigue makes cowards of us all. Fatigue makes us angry, right? It makes us irritable. It makes us frustrated, right? Which comes out in a conversation. And so you have the quality of life issues, and then you have the environment in general, what's going on in your general global community, whatever environment, but also what might be in your current environment. I mean, what might be right around you in this moment. And then you have expectations of what's going to happen, what's occurring, what you're bringing to me, why you're talking to me, I mean, all of this is present. Then you throw in things like what is the state of that person's esteem and confidence? What's their state of gratitude? And this isn't even connecting to a couple other things that also influence the lens, one of which is variable, that's attitude. Some people's attitude generally is negative, but that can change quickly. It can change in a moment. But then you have mindsets. Mindsets are just very similar to the static lens. Those things they're changeable, but they don't change. They don't change very quickly unless someone is incredibly self-aware, which most people are not because they're not doing the work to be such, right? And so those are the deeper convictions that someone has, their belief system, their values, their principles, all that stuff. All of that is in your interaction, all of it. So here's a question. This is a curveball, Chris. I'm sorry. Well, actually, sorry, not sorry. Whose responsibility is it in the conversation? Whose responsibility is it to navigate?
Well, you're only responsible for you, right? You cannot, you're responsible for you and how you react. You're not necessarily responsible for how the other person reacts.
I think I'd
Um,
use a different word than react.
what would you use?
I'd use the word engage.
Engage. Oh, love that.
I mean, I don't love the word react. Um,
Yeah.
the word react is as if you're out of control, right? Reaction by definition, right? In a general sense, if you're reacting to something, it's usually not favorable, right? It's like this. It's happening in the second, right? A response is a little bit different because
Mm.
a response is something that's trained, that's well thought. And so you could look at a reaction and a response as the same thing, but they usually aren't.
Yeah.
Typically, a reaction, right? I always use reactive and proactive as the two different sides of the equation, right? Reaction is the lesser side. That's the side you want to stay away from in life. You want to be proactive on the other side. So when it comes to the responsibility piece, you want to come to each engagement with another person because the reality is that person is going to remember how they felt talking to you. They're not going to remember what you said, but they're going to remember what they felt like in the interaction, which is going to dictate future interactions, or even if there are future interactions, depending on the nature of the relationship. And so I look at it like I'm 100% responsible to make sure this conversation goes well. I don't place any responsibility on the person. That you might immediately go, well, that doesn't even make any sense. I would agree with you, but that's how I'm going to approach it. I'm going to do everything I can to make the
Mhm.
reaction, the interaction favorable. Everything I can. I can't control what they do and what they take from it, but I can control what I do to try to make it a great interaction. Does that make sense?
Yes. I love that. Um, and I feel like I didn't say it right. That's what I meant. Like you, you are in control and you have to, you can steer the conversation. And even like I've seen it so many times, like it doesn't matter if it's in a personal interchange or if it's at work. Like if you go in with that intention, I think that intention is the biggest thing too. Um, for example, I had a client that I was really I dreaded the conversation every time because they were always rude. Nothing ever worked out. Nothing was good enough. And it was just like, okay, another 30 minutes of getting almost bullied, right? And talked to like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I heard this, I don't know when it was or what it was, but I heard the almost like the saying or that little trick that go in and have a good feeling. Like, what is something that you could do? What is something that you like to come out of that conversation? If you could change it, what would the conversation be like and how would it go? Um, and then also find something good about that other person before you go in, even though it's very hard sometimes, especially when you're being called names and all the things. But try to find something good. And you won't believe it, but I tried that. And the next call was 180-degree difference, like day and night. And I've seen that happen so many times that intention and because it changes your energy and the level of how you go into that conversation. And that also changes how you show up, how your body language is, how your expression is, how your tone is. And, that is, I think it's so overlooked and it's something that I definitely understood being a foreigner and English is not my first language. I understand that my native language is way sounds really harsh. And so I have that sometimes, in the English language when I translate it and I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. Like I'm really nice, I promise. But knowing that, like you said, being aware and understanding your intentions can change like how a conversation is going.
Well,
100%.
you, that's a wonderful example. But one of the things that you highlighted in that without saying it, and which people don't frequently think about, is when you have the opportunity, you prepare for a conversation,
Hmm.
right? When you have the opportunity, you don't go in, okay, I got to talk about this, and you just go in. You need to sit for a bit. Yeah, obviously, there are many, many, many scenarios in the day to day life where it's right there, it's right in the moment, and you're not preparing for something. But something like a client conversation or a conversation with a coworker or a conversation with someone who works for you, or those things, if the conversation is to be with purpose, as opposed to
Hmm.
just yeah, we're connecting here for a minute, between whatever we're doing, preparation is something you will never regret. And what a wonderful thing that was a great nugget you just gave people is to set your intention, right? And you know, especially with a client, first of all, and this is something that when I all the years I did customer service teaching, one good thing you can think about one right away is this person's writing your paycheck. That's an
Hmm.
important thing to recognize. The customer is writing your paycheck, not the company you work for, because without the customer, you're not working. There is no company. And so it doesn't make them always right, but it makes them have to be properly handled, as opposed to that doesn't mean you shouldn't fire customers, depending on the nature of your business. I personally, if someone is not kind, now granted, I've worked for myself for 36 years, so I have that right. But if someone is not kind or unethical, that's the end. I don't care how much money they could bring me. I'm not engaging in that relationship that because it's going to soil me in some way and I'm compromising values to do so. Um, but it's a terrific point. But here, this is just a little sidebar, which my whole life is a sidebar because it's just how my brain just tangentially pops around. But if you try to come to every conversation with love and respect, even if you don't know the right words, your heart will come out. You open your mouth and your heart comes out. And in even the most difficult, right, when I'm doing conflict training, right, that's the spirit you have to come from is that I care about this human being in front of me, and I care about getting the best outcome. And I know not everybody operates like that. And guess what? The people who don't operate like that get results that are congruent with the way they operate, which are going to be shrinking and shrinking and shrinking in life because that's how you alienate human beings. But when you come from a place of love and caring and respect, you can find your way, right? In any kind of conversation. I mean, we're way to the side of where we started here, but so what? It's our podcast. So if it's a value, great, and if it's not, you can just pretend you never heard it.
Yeah, based on that, or piggybacking, I guess, to some degree, off of that is if somebody's not aware and you have a conversation with a human being, be it in your personal life or in your professional life, um, and they are not aware of any of this, and they're rude, they don't have a good intention, and what do you do in that situation? How can you turn that? I mean, easy enough if you have the chance, walk away, of course, that if it doesn't align with your values and your principles and all of that, but let's say you can't and you actually care for that person and you actually want to make that relationship work.
So this is going to sound really ridiculously simple. Um, the natural, right? It's what I'm hearing you say, and please let me know if I'm on the right track here, is you're making me uncomfortable because of the way you're in this conversation, right? So the classic response, again, for someone who's either unskilled or not aware, right, is a reaction. It's an emotional reaction. They won't control their facial expression. They might say something harmful. They might say whatever, right? They get flustered. Slow it down, pause,
Mm.
keep your voice calm, and ask a question. Just ask a question. That is the greatest disruptor. Now, it's one of the best things you can do in any regard, but it's a disruptor of the pattern. If someone says something egregious to you in a conversation, you could just calmly say, what would make you say that?
Mm-hmm.
And then what you've done, that literally they'll just internally they'll jolt because then they'll go, oh my gosh, I'm an asshole. I mean, I'm just going to say, over the years, I've gotten really good at this. I will never say something mean to someone. Never. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not something that I do. But I don't have to because I can ask you a question and you'll say something mean about yourself to yourself as a result of me asking the question because you will suddenly be confronted with your own behavior without me doing anything but saying I might, depending on the relationship, I might say something like, I know that your intention here is not to hurt me. So what would make you say that? What's going on? I, I mean, that just totally disrupted and suddenly the whatever is behind the curtain is going to be right there, right? Which, by the
Yeah.
way, it's going to show you a little about the depth of the relationship because a good relationships are based on trust. They're based on trust. And the deeper the trust, the deeper the relationship. And the deeper the relationship, the more someone understands or you can bring to light the fact that you would never try to hurt this person. So if in fact something you said hurt this person, forgive me, that was not my intention. And then you communicate about it, right? But in this case, you turned that a little bit. I know you wouldn't purposefully hurt me. What's going on? I know you wouldn't purposely come at me like that. What's happening? And then you'll either find out what's the thing in their variable lens that just came in, right? Or what's the thing going on in their life, or what misinterpretation did they have about what you just said if it was based on something that you said.
Yeah, I think so great. Oh my gosh, I want to take notes all day long now. But um it is, and it's not just in your personal life, but also think about your professional life, whatever you do. Like think about it first, especially if you have someone that is usually performing really well, and now all of a sudden the performance drops, or he's very rude, or he's not responsive, or whatever else. Like ask the question, like clarify what is happening in their life, or did something happen with at work or with a relation with a coworker or whatever else, right? And seek to understand what is going on. I think that's always the best thing that you can do, no matter what, because you cannot walk in somebody else's shoes. You just don't
No,
know what's going on.
no, that's a golden nugget. You always want to seek to understand. I mean, it's actually a golden tenet of communication. I think the first person who really put that out there was Stephen Covey years ago. I'm sure someone
Mhm.
else did, because again, as Marcus Aurelius said, you can study human beings for 40 years and it's just as if you lived 10,000 because nothing has changed as it relates to human beings and interaction. Um, but if you look at how someone receives input, the basis of the beginning of any discussion, as I mentioned before, is trust of some sort. Some there's just inherent trust built into the situation, or mutual respect to some degree, or something, right? But before what you say has any value to someone else, you must understand where they're coming from, and they must know that you're trying to understand. If which means it can't be about what you have to say; it has to be about them. It has to be about what they have to say, and that only comes from you opening your ears and your eyes and listening, asking the questions, and then sitting back and taking it all in, not looking at it autobiographically, which we'll talk about when we talk about listening, but with the intention of truly understanding this person. That's actual communication. Right? That's
Mhm.
what that actually is. It's communication isn't simple. It can
No.
be after a while with someone, right? And professional people are very, very concerned about how well they do in the professional world, and they should be, right? It's how they make their way, and it's what provides resources for them. And certainly, it should be providing fulfillment and accomplishment and all those kinds of things. But ironically, the best place to practice all of this stuff is in your personal life. And it is with the people you are closest to, because you are least likely to communicate properly with people you care the most about. They are the ones you will react to, right? Because
Mhm.
it's going to be more emotionally charged for you, which makes that the best training ground there is, right? When you learn to communicate with the people you love in a magical way, you will be spectacular in the rest of the world.
Mhm.
Spectacular. But if you're not doing that at home, you'll never be great at it anywhere else, ever.
Yeah, so true. And to follow up on that too is like, don't just look at or try to look at through the lens and understand the lens of somebody else. Like, also ask yourself those questions, like, where am I coming from? What's my emotional state? What's my background? What might be different than the person I'm talking to right now? And try to understand it from that perspective too. I know that, again, it's that awareness piece that we've been talking about for pretty much every episode so far, because it's just so important. And again, it's so basic in quotation marks, but it's essential. It's
Well,
everything.
you bring up another great point. Um, you want to be present in a conversation, right? You want to be present in an interaction. So if you just got dumped on by someone and it's affecting you, don't try to hold that back. You could, in the interaction, you could say, if I look a little out of kilter, if I don't
Mm,
communicate right, something just happened and I'm a little rocked by it. And so please forgive me. You've just taken that away, right? You've just actually gotten permission to be, and you're being vulnerable, by the way, which vulnerability and authenticity, those are superpowers in human connection, because there's too much fake in the world in everywhere you are. I mean, most of what you see around you is fake. It's coming from real people, but it's fake. It's not
mm,
really what's happening, which is part of the communication gap, and something we'll talk about further. But getting present is such a I'm glad you brought it up. It's really, really a great thing. Yeah. Check in with yourself. How am I feeling coming into this? What am I worried about? What am I struggling with? What's bothering me? because that stuff is coming into the interaction whether you like it or not. So to be present about it and clear about it. I'm not saying you say, well, I just found out that I'm going to die tomorrow. I'm not, you don't necessarily have to drop that bomb with someone, but there are nice, gentle ways to let someone know, right? Even in interaction, this is another little golden nugget, especially if you're in leadership and you're new to leadership. But it doesn't have to be new to leadership; it can be any level of leadership, because you are going to, no matter what, consistently, if you're in leadership, face uncomfortable situations until you face that situation 100 times. And even then, you'll still have some, if you care about the person you're interacting with, you'll still have some anxiety about it because you'll care about how they're going to respond. But
Mm,
you want to come to the conversation. If you're uncomfortable, you can say, this conversation is a little bit uncomfortable for me. I just want to put
mhm,
that out there. And that is just being real. And it's unbelievable how that takes any emotional charge and just drops it off, just
yeah.
takes it right out of the discussion.
It takes that stress out for both sides because they also see that you're a real person. You're not a
Yes.
robot.
Yes.
So I love this. I know we could talk about this forever. But definitely I think what I want to leave you with, like I love little homeworks and exercises. I think everyone knows that by now, but like journal about it. Maybe you had a recent conversation where there was a misunderstanding or sometime in your life, maybe years ago, that you're like still feeling weird about it and awkward or whatever. Think about like what did you assume in this situation? Why did that happen? Like what was your lens? Did you ever figure out what the other person's lens was? And then always seek feedback and seek clarification and try to understand that. And practice. That's a good one. Practice, be consistent about, ask yourself too, like not just asking the other person, like did you mean it this way, or clarifying like a certain response or comment that that person made, but also ask yourself, how are they seeing this situation right now? Like it's just something to I know, like I said, we cannot walk in somebody else's shoes, but we can try to understand from their perspective.
Chris,
So
that was great. That was great. A great takeaway for the audience to focus on. And I just wanted to say as we wrap up how much I appreciate you and you making this happen and all that you bring to it. Because if it weren't for you, this wouldn't exist. And somebody's going to get help from this, and that's from you. So thank you.
thank you. Yes, having a hard time still with accepting this, but thank you for the kind words. And to all the listeners, if you have any questions or any follow-ups, let us know. And also your takeaways. We want to hear from you. What did you take away? What was new? What was surprising? And did you do the exercise? And
Thanks
with
for
that,
being here.
yes, thank you for being here. And we see you and you hear from us next time.
Yep. See you later. Thanks again, Kurt. Bye, everybody.
Bye.